Little Liam was only 8 years old, and his life changed overnight. A massive hurricane devastated his city, taking away his home and his family. That night, the last thing he heard was his mother's voice among the howling winds, screams, collapsing walls, streets filling with water, and then silence. When the surviving children were placed in an orphanage, Liam stopped speaking. The trauma had shut him down completely, and he wouldn't even make eye contact with anyone. While the other children played, he just sat by the window, staring outside, lost in his past. At night, he would wake up from nightmares, whispering his mother's name into the darkness. But no one at the orphanage could heal the pain inside him. One day, an orphanage worker sat next to him and spoke softly. "Liam, you know, there are good people in this world, people who want to help you." But Liam turned away. To him, the world was nothing but destruction and loneliness. The orphanage director, realizing Liam's condition wasn't improving, decided to find a solution. One of the children mentioned watching Ellen DeGeneres' show and how Ellen helped people in need. Inspired by this, the director and some volunteers decided to write a letter for Liam. The letter read, "Dear Ellen, little Liam lost his family in a disaster, and he hasn't spoken since that day. He was once a joyful child, but now he is trapped in silence. Maybe you can give him hope." When the letter reached Ellen's team, the room fell into silence. The idea of such a small child carrying so much pain and loss was heartbreaking. Ellen read the letter, took a deep breath, and turned to her team. "We have to create a miracle for this child." But how? Liam wouldn't speak, wouldn't trust people. How could they possibly reach his heart? When Liam was brought to the studio with the orphanage staff, his fear only grew stronger. His eyes darted around the room, scanning the people, but he avoided eye contact with everyone. The bright studio lights, the rush of crew members, the large screens, and the overlapping voices. It was all too much, too big, too crowded, too loud. He was gently placed into a chair. Silently, he folded his hands in his lap and lowered his head. His small arms wrapped tightly around his knees, as if trying to shield himself. His eyes fixated on a flickering light bulb in the corner of the room, as if he was trying to hold on to something. But what? Then the door opened. The background hum of the studio briefly faded. Ellen DeGeneres walked into the room. For a moment, she simply observed Liam. There he was, a small, fragile child, trapped in his own world. He looked so defenseless, as if the wrong word could completely shatter him. Ellen knelt down in front of him, lowering herself to his eye level. She gave a gentle smile, her voice soft and comforting. "Hi, Liam. My name is Ellen." Liam lifted his head slightly. He was doing everything he could to avoid looking at her, but for a brief second, just a few moments, his eyes met hers, and in that gaze, there was everything: loss, fear, hopelessness, despair. But still, Liam didn't speak. Ellen was patient. She didn't rush him. She didn't try to fill the silence. She understood children. She knew she couldn't expect him to talk like an adult or immediately trust her. Slowly, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small teddy bear. Its fur was slightly worn, but it looked warm and comforting. Ellen extended it toward Liam. "I brought this for you." Liam stared at the teddy bear, but didn't take it. Ellen gently stroked its head, still smiling softly. "It's one of my favorite toys." Liam's hands trembled. Ellen's voice dropped to a whisper, almost like a secret meant only for him. "You know, I used to feel lonely when I was little too." Liam finally lifted his head, really looking at her this time, and for a moment, he saw something familiar in her eyes. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he reached out his small hands and took the teddy bear. He held it close to his chest, as if it was something fragile, something precious. For the first time, he felt warmth, but still, he didn't speak. Ellen paused for a moment, then softly asked, "Would you like to tell me something?" Liam's eyes shifted away. There was so much he wanted to say, but the words, they wouldn't come. His throat felt tight, like he was choking on everything he had been holding inside. His fingers ran over the teddy bear's fur. He took a deep breath. For a split second, he opened his mouth as if to speak, But then he stopped. The words disappeared before they could form. Ellen waited. She gave him time. Sometimes silence is the loudest voice of all. After a long pause, she leaned in and gently placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. "Whenever you're ready to talk, I'll be here." Liam looked up. His eyes were watery, but he didn't cry. For the first time, maybe ever, someone was willing to wait for him. And then, something very small but incredibly powerful happened. Liam, ever so slightly, nodded. Ellen smiled. Sometimes, a miracle starts with just the smallest movement of the head. That day, Ellen hadn't gotten Liam to speak, but she had ignited a spark inside him. Her team arranged for him to receive psychological support through a therapy program. In addition, they decided to honor Liam's family's memory by helping rebuild a community that had been devastated by the hurricane. After returning from the program, something started to change. Every night, the boy who used to wake up screaming from nightmares now saw something different in his dreams. Ellen handing him the teddy bear, and for the first time, in a whisper so soft it was barely audible, he said, "Mom." The orphanage staff couldn't hold back their tears. It was a sign. Liam's silence was beginning to break. At first, he only whispered at night, clutching his teddy bear tightly. His voice was like a fleeting melody, gone too quickly to hold on to. But as the days passed, the other children in the orphanage noticed how much he cared for his teddy bear. They started asking him small questions, showing interest. At first, Liam was hesitant, but instead of retreating, he began nodding in response. And then, one day, a child asked him something simple. Liam hesitated, his lips barely moving. But then, in the softest voice, he whispered, "Yes." It was small, barely noticeable. But for Liam, it was a breakthrough. Weeks later, Ellen DeGeneres sent him a special message. "Whenever you feel ready to talk, I'll be here." And this time, Liam took a piece of paper, held a pen in his small hands, and wrote his first word, "Thank you." It was just 2 words. But for Liam, it was the sound of a new beginning. Liam's life began to change completely. With the support of the therapy Ellen arranged, he slowly started to speak again. Eventually, he returned to school. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Ellen invited him back onto her show. This time, Liam walked onto the stage on his own. The audience rose to their feet, clapping for him. At the center of the stage, Ellen stood with open arms, waiting. And Liam, for the first time in front of cameras, in front of millions of people, he whispered, "Thank you, Ellen." The entire studio erupted in applause. This wasn't just about a child finding his voice again. It was about a child finding his place in the world again. That day, as Ellen hugged him, she leaned in and whispered, "You are so strong, Liam, and knowing you has been an honor." And maybe that was the real miracle.